1, 2, 1, 2. No swearing.
Do you want to sit there, Mark, in the middle, and I'll move along one?
It doesn't matter.
Oh. So who else is? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we're going to. I don't know how we're going to create a single movement again with so much political rivalry. I don't know what we do about it. You know, there's no question that the organisational ranks of the SNP have been captured.
You need somebody like Donald Trump to come in and say, I want to be the King of Scotland. It's a title that's free. And suddenly...
Do you know, that's what Alf and Linda said, that we should write to Donald Trump and invite him to become King of Scotland. I said, well, anyone but Donald Trump.
It needs to be a unifying figure. Some great evil that needs to be there.
So you think it's more powerful? Yeah, you know, the sad thing is, I think you may be right. I think it may be more unifying when people face a threat, the common threat, than when they have a common purpose.
I mean, when you look into the history, and you see Outlander's a great example. Jamie Fraser is enemies with so many people, but then he becomes friends with them. And I think as politics shift, then we've just got to be more adult about it.
There's the thing, because I'm going to say this to you. I shouldn't. I'm just so angry at the moment at the tantrums and all the rest of it. But the viciousness of when David asked Ruddy, and I asked him as well, to take the SSRG logo off the aircraft. I could show you what he wrote about it. It's disgraceful. I mean, personal, jabbing, ugly attacks. Really? That he wanted the logo taken off. He didn't dare say that to me because he wants Salvo out campaigning for candidates. It's not going to happen. They can't.
No.
But
Well, I mean,
and he gives
Salvo's...
himself away. He says, you know, we're doing this unlike other parties. Oh, right. So you're admitting this is you're in competition. this is, you know, and we'll decorate the house afterwards. Well, we'll be the first country in the entire world that obtains independence without having to find its own constitutional identity, and without then going to. I'll swap with you in a sec. Without then just don't do anything else. Africa and India.
We are live
Right. Okay.
on the web. Have you just
I
given
will
up
swap
all
with you
these
because you want to be in the middle, don't
again?
you?
You're not talking
Wouldn't mind being here
trash.
just so I can get up easily. You want to be there? Or?
You want to be here?
I wouldn't mind being here just because it's easier to get
In
up. And,
that case, I'm absolutely fine because I can sit next to this very
You sit
heroic
there.
lady
okay.
I'll get
who
rid of
has had
it.
the guts to do what the rest of us should have bloody done. That one's mine, I think, because I've been drinking it, so.
At the end of the days, a
You'll,
man in Barcelona, nobody's
I just
taken
want to
any
check.
money.
Have you switched on? Are you switched on? You're switched on.
Am I switched on? I don't
Yes,
know.
you are.
Are you switched on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Can we just get some audio levels? Just say, introduce yourself.
Okay.
Testing.
Yeah, I don't think you are on. Are you switched on though?
Yes, switched on.
Yeah, right.
Just very quiet.
Well, I've muffled it because I was trying to say something about
Okay,
somebody.
we ready to go?
Sarah, can you just
That sounds okay to me.
If you can make sure your head's turned here.
My
say
head's
hello?
That was a little bit of a problem yesterday because you kept on turning here.
Oh, sorry.
No biggie.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm Sarah Salyers, and I've just had an argument with the ground and lost.
I'm Mark McDonald, and I'll be leading this discussion. And Vaughn,
One,
just
two, one, two.
introduce yourself so that just to make sure that mic works.
Okay.
Yvonne Ridley from
Yeah.
the Borders.
Okay. Okay, so welcome to this extinguished guests. Welcome to the welcome to this final session of this SSRG conference, which has been extremely exhausting but extremely invigorating at the same time. So I really want to thank you all for coming. I wish I could thank everybody that was here yesterday and has been over here over the course of the last few days. But, you know, people have to get back. That's perfectly understandable. The attendance is slightly less. And I come here because I want to just lead a discussion with you. I don't have any structured comments or anything that I want to, but I want to learn from you about what you learned and what you think is the best way forward. And that's the kind of the objective as to where do we go from here? What do we do at this point? And I'll just make a few remarks myself and then open it up either to my colleagues here or anybody who just wants to get up and talk and speak about these particular themes. But let me just give you a couple things that I learned in the panel that we just had over EFTA EEA. I had been thinking for a long time about, because David and I have visited Brussels and EFTA, and we got to know, we know the system, we know a little bit about how the EEA works, this type of thing. But the question of what, if Scotland had a border with England, and England was, it's still outside of the single market, and still outside of the customs union, and still in Brexit land, and Scotland was in EFTA EEA, how would a border work? From David, I got that's all to negotiate. Once independence is achieved, you make your destiny. You go out there and you say, okay, European Commission, can we have a customs union? And you go to other institutions and you make your own arrangements. That's the whole point. Most of the international institutions are not one size fits all. A lot of it is negotiation about what the arrangements that Scotland would have with whatever institution. But that can only come after independence, and specifically when Scotland is in a position to negotiate with other countries and other international institutions, and to make binding agreements, to make treaties, and sign treaties, and do that thing that countries do when they're independent. And so that obviously, independence is an important step. Obviously, that's why we're here.
First step.
First step.
First step.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I learned. One thing I learned many. But also, where do we go from here? And David and I were talking earlier today on the way over, and hopefully within a month or so, let's say, that we will have gone through and made a very detailed document, basically based on what we saw yesterday afternoon. You know, all of this, Alf Baird, Craig Murray, Dr. Black, what's his first name?
Professor Robert Black.
Robert Black, especially him. I thought his thing was fantastic. I mean, just demolishing all the myths, the prevailing orthodoxy that Scots have been taught for so many years about what the Treaty of 1707. Oh yeah, it's a treaty of equals. It's a it's a voluntary union and all that crap. I mean, you know, and what I love is seeing somebody of his stature and his intellectual capability, who has for years gone on this Dyson stuff about Scotland and England being extinguished, and and then they formed this great new union of equals and all that garbage. But just to see him, as someone who's taught for 50 or 60 years, something like that, and all of it, and then just that light bulb comes on, and he said, "Wow, I've been wrong all along." And he's Scottish, and he went along with this stuff for so years. And so if he can change his mind, exactly. If someone who has been again imbued, swum in this, intellectual,
Fairy tale.
yeah, fairy tale for so long, if he can, have this light bulb moment, anybody can, So that's what. So a part of it of going forward, as I said, is David and I are going to be working on a document summarizing the arguments into a, digestible document. I'm not sure how many pages it'll be, but going through and laying out the arguments that particularly Dr. Black made, but others as well. And we hope to have that out within the next month or so. So that's how we
Thank you.
plan to begin to bring this forward. Yeah, so I'll be doing some running around, but go.
Well,
Is there any
back
way
home we
we
do.
could get copies of all of those treaties and the different parts of the Act which were made clear yesterday that Scotland and England are not part of that?
Because
Can
he
I
cited.
can I just say that's
Please, go ahead.
exactly what our document will detail all the key facts that we learnt yesterday and source it. So it's obviously Professor Black. It's
I think we're looking for the actual.
oh yeah, but
Yes, we have to go through. We have to go through it. Because he cited so many things that I've never read.
Yeah.
So,
Excuse me. Sorry, we will. I've got Sharoff's speech, mine, Professor Black's.
so we just
Alf's and Craig's were both, Alf's was a slide presentation.
yeah we've got
So that's a wee bit harder to put together, but that will
no we've got that
come here. Right.
we've got it
Okay, you've got his.
yeah yeah.
So what we will do is we will put those, and we'll need to get Craig's transcribed, but we'll put those on the Liberation website. So they'll
So
be
it'll
there
get
for people to
published.
see. And one other thing that's available now for anybody that's interested, and I think there's about 20 copies of each, so it'll be first come, first served. And I hope the merchandise people are there because I left them with them yesterday. These copies of the expert opinions that were submitted to the C24 along with a request to attend the New York session. And those expert opinions, so the cover letter and those will be on the site, but those expert opinions go through the position of New Caledonia and the position of French Polynesia, and they set out where Scotland is in exactly that same position. And I can tell you, even for me, that was a shocker. There's just no doubt of the position that Scotland occupies. So there's physical copies of that. They're not stapled together, so you'll need to go through and get your 5 pages of each if you want them. But they should be with the Salvo merchandise team at the front, at the entrance, if anybody wants any.
I wonder if people think it would be a good idea if we took that material and tried to have it printed in a smaller format, because it's not that expensive to produce a booklet, and so that people can actually get the booklet, and therefore, as well as put it online, if you put it into a PDF, it could be published. I think it would be a useful reference guide.
That was Annie's suggestion.
presentations from the earlier days, like the electricity one.
You'd like to get copies of those? Yeah, I'd maybe have to ask if some folks to get, we'll try to get that together. We'll try to get those and put them on our website. The one of Mr. Stenik that was particularly interesting regarding energy. So,
Also from Monday as well.
who? Sorry,
Can't remember which.
the other energy guy?
No, Friday.
Remember which one it was.
Hold
It's in
on.
the guide.
So Friday was Social Security and Pensions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I remember.
There's currency, Social Security and Pensions, currency and banking.
Which was the current?
Manifesto for
The
Independence.
pensions. There was there was Tommy Sheridan and
Day After Independence.
Jim Osborne, I believe. Yeah. Jim Osborne's thing. I'll dig those out. I'll get them. And we'll put them up and make them available. So, yeah.
That was the panel.
He was on a panel. He was on the discussion panel on the Scottish question. He was on the Scottish questions, right?
You know, I've already forgotten that even happened. It just reminded me. Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, we did that.
Yeah, Jim Osborne. Did anybody else do it? Hold on a second.
So I think
Neil didn't do a presentation.
No, he was on the panel though.
Right. Well, but he did Social Security, but I don't think he did a PowerPoint.
No, he didn't.
It was just Jim Osborne that did, and so we'll get Jim Osborne.
Yeah. You need a microphone.
Well, he didn't do a PowerPoint, but we will also seek to put up all the videos as well of the presentations. So.
Well, that's what I was thinking of.
The PowerPoints, we just have to ask whoever it was that permission to publish it, but I'm sure they will. So yeah, we've got them already, obviously, because that's how you saw them. Yeah.
But there's still going to be a couple days of going through the videos and putting them up and stuff like that. Because it's just been such a whirlwind over the past few days. So yes, go ahead, sir.
Congratulations for the whole thing.
Thank you.
yeah, well done.
Very well presented, very professional 3 days ago because of the holidays, all day, and just today. So I think it's brilliant.
Okay.
To me, the main takeaway, and all of the contributions were
Is it switched on?
and again,
Well, sorry.
although as a man,
Sorry, just one second. Here we go. Hold it out there.
thank you. And the reason I'll use Robert Black's thing if I may, and Sarah's work and other folks' work about the facts. One wonders if a crowdfunding could happen, or finance, whatever, to do a PhD on what I'll call the facts. I've got a friend who retired considerable resources and did a PhD on who the hell did he do it on? Cunningham Braille. He gave the resources to do it. So, and it was published as a book by the point is, it's there. And if something similar could be done on what I'll call the purpose of this contribution, which is the facts, that would put it into the academy. Robert Black, when I asked him later on, said because of groupthink, basically, on the legal establishment, it's not getting through. The fact that I'm 69 years of age and I'm only getting these key facts
No.
so late in life that one of my inspirations was Tom Devine, and yet I'm now, as of yesterday, thinking of Tom's work as a Parliament, substantial international renown, yet it is a Parliament. Isn't that quite remarkable? And that Parliament really, I would think, needs someone to do PhD, and I suppose in a sense, if you were able to crowdfund, or maybe from folk who have money, who are prepared to put in a bit of money, say, there you go, there's your PhD, there's your funding, there's the criteria, you might get some Aspen postgraduate to take that forward. When it's done, send it published, £8 a copy by Edinburgh University Press, and the Academy then have difficulty denying the facts.
I think an academic article could do largely the same thing. Something that
No, Olympic PhD, Frank.
I've been told the same thing. I have been told the same thing and been asked by two separate people to consider applying to produce that work as part of a PhD. I can't really take the time to do that myself until we've got Scotland free, but I'm hoping that there's somebody out there that might. So.
At least.
It's a solution. It's not a perfect solution, but until someone comes up with a plan A, there's a plan.
Can I just say, one of the reasons me and Mark went to EFTA House just over a year and a half ago, one, I had no idea what it was going to be like. So it was a room a bit bigger than this, full of 200 well-educated, very polite, a lot of folk that were English speakers, funny enough. Hence why I think
They all were.
Yeah, I think they all were.
In addition to Norwegian.
Even the Norwegian, what was it, guy representing the energy thing that was sitting in front of me. But what struck me is they, I think, look at the UK as odd. An odd country that isn't really interested in being equal with other countries. They're all about trading within each other. They're all about harmonizing the same requirements, the same rights. I mean, one of the things that was touched on, I think, earlier today by one of your speakers, which reminds me of something that was said there. There had been a test case, and I think he had come from an Eastern European country. Russia had issued an arrest warrant for him, but he was now a citizen of Iceland, which is in EFTA. So as an EFTA EEA citizen, so he's not a European citizen, he's not an EU citizen, he's an EFTA and EEA. And so he travelled, here's the mistake, be careful where you go on holiday. So he travelled to what was an East European country, I think it might have been Estonia or somewhere like that. And of course they enacted the Russian arrest warrant, and so he was arrested. And then they had to go to court, and this went to the EFTA court. So there's a court, which is the EFTA court. We met the
convener. He's a
met
a friend of ours. I just had a discussion with him the other day.
The registrar,
the registrar of the EFTA court.
Registrar of the EFTA court. We made a lot of friends, actually, funny enough, by accidentally leaving a leaflet that said yes for EU with Scotland's flag in the middle of it. And this caused a bit of a storm when they picked it up. Have you seen this?
It was the EFTA flag with Scotland's flag included on with the other four.
How it will look in the future, you know. Anyway, so they were fascinated by the very idea that Scotland was considering this, and when that might happen. So here was what I thought was really interesting. So this guy had been arrested. He's not an EU citizen, right? So this was the first court case of its type to end up at the EFTA court. The EFTA court being the highest court that regulates the EFTA members, and there's only 4 of them.
No, there's just 3 because it's just EEA. It's not.
No,
Switzerland's not included.
But they're in EFTA.
They're not in EEA. It's the EEA court. It's not the EFTA court. It's more technically speaking, it's the EEA court. Yeah, right.
Anyway, established in law when it went to the court that what the Russian arrest warrant was unlawful, unconstitutional, and and broke the person's human rights because they were an EFTA citizen in the EEA, therefore an EEA citizen, which effectively means you are an EU citizen, because the EEA agreement mimics everything that the EU does. So if you're a country that's signed up to the EEA, you must abide by all the rules that are laid down for EU citizens, etc., and trade. So this established in law that this person was protected and that the arrest warrant was unlawful, and that I think it was Estonia. It was an East European country that used to, of course, be part of the Soviet Union, so they were still friendly with Russia. So they had enacted the Russian arrest warrant. But this guy is a citizen of Iceland, so he was protected. So the court ruled that he had the same rights as all EU citizens and he must be released immediately. So, and that's what happened. So that's just a practical example of why our rights will be enhanced as Scottish citizens if we happen to be a country that's in EFTA and the EEA. We will have the same rights as every EU citizen.
Yes, ma'am, please.
If I might be permitted just to go back to the next step. And last night, Dave Llewellyn posted on Twitter about yesterday's session, and people were actually going, oh, what's going on? Where is this happening? And also, one more thing that happened on Twitter was someone said they heard two people in the butchers in Stornoway discussing Scotland's constitutional future. So
As you do.
At the butchers.
That's what we should be doing. So how can we make this? Because all of us here are plugged into SSRG, Salvo, Liberation, but lots of people are not. So how can we make that just the language of everyday discourse on the buses, trains, wherever? What can we do?
There are several burning questions that we really need to put our heads together on and develop strategy for. And one of the strongest of those, the most important of those, which goes alongside the lack of a Scottish media, by the way, and is actually, you could almost say it's because we don't have any Scottish media that we're having this conversation at all. You look at what I said this yesterday, we have no cultural programming that is Scottish. We have no political programming that is from a Scottish viewpoint. Scottish Questions is, well, we won't even go into the joke of what pretends to be based in or about Scotland, because it's all so deliberately designed to present a particular picture. We have no real Scottish news. We have no drama, no Scottish drama. We're not, and what we've seen, when I've told people repeatedly, when I went to the States, when I got married, and I went to the States in 2002, and I came home in 2012, I had been advised by a journalist that most people have heard of, John Pilger.
Journeyman.
A journalist.
Journeyman Films. Yeah.
We had been planning a series together, which didn't in the end get made, along with Ken Loach, which was like one of the most, one of those moments of, I am not worthy. But it was the BBC, and things were just really, that takeover of the propaganda establishment was really getting going. And I'd had a series of things where they hadn't got made, or they'd been turned, they were really, they'd taken them and made them themselves in a different way. And so I wasn't sure at that point what to do, whether to jump and move to the States or keep going back and forward. So I talked to John, and I can't do an Australian accent, but he said, I'm afraid, my girl, we're dead in the water till the internet comes into its own. We forget that the internet wasn't really then what it is now. And I said, in that case, this precious little point might hang around here. And I didn't. I sold up and I went to the States. But at that point, we had a very healthy, independent film and TV industry in Scotland. We had an organisation called PAC, the Producers Alliance for Cinema and Television, that most independent companies were part of, mine included. We met, we pitched things to the main broadcasters. I worked for Channel 4, for STV, for the BBC, for BBC Scotland. There were post-production facilities, hire companies.
Not anymore.
There were studios all over the place. It was a really thriving industry. When I came back, it had been murdered. There was nothing left. And they had brought in a rule or legislation that said that independent companies like my own, despite having won a Royal Television Society award and been shortlisted for others, we would have had to go through preferred companies. There's where your editorial control comes in right away. And you can't really make a living as a production company that way because they take the production fee. Anyway, so it had been completely shut down. And it was obvious to me that this had been deliberate and that this is because of the referendum, along with putting a Union Jack, a butcher's apron on every product that is Scottish. It's the absolute, this, at the same time as they're rushing to take everything that they can from Scotland so that it belongs to them no matter what happens, sort of thing. It's like a feeding frenzy to me, what we're seeing going on. So we're in a race against time. How do we, but shutting down the media, shutting down Scottish media, making sure there is no Scottish perspective, no Scottish lens on anything happening, it's deplatforming at its most profound level. Now, one answer to how we get this out is sitting on my right. So in a moment, I will hand over to David to say a little about his plans. But I think it's important that we support them. I think it's important that people are not going to go back, unfortunately, to the town hall meeting. It's just not going to happen. Nothing, no one. But what I'm saying is things like, no, you're absolutely right. Well, what I was going to say is that John Pilger was right. So people are they're not on it's not the telly, although they are watching the telly, Annie, and they are hearing and taking what they're, believing what they're seeing, unfortunately. But it's online. It's online media. We've got to find some way of converging those things, and we're going to have to think outside the box. Can anyone here think of a way that immediately gets through to people? I've laid leaflets out, posters, whatever. Doesn't happen. Town hall meetings. Talking to people is bottom line. So, but I think David's got something that might excite people. So
it's happening. Danny Darling's Shattered Nation. England is falling apart. Economically, England is becoming more unequal. Reform is just part of it. But there are, it's England, and it's far bigger, but you've got, and I've said yesterday, you've got things like Navarra Media. I'm talking about the Navarra Media model. You've got Guy Stevenson, who's getting all hell thrown at him because his website is growing. Now, we're a tenth of that, and I realise the challenges of that. But there is already a kickback over what I'll call the disintegration of England. And I think probably next year's event, I would be amazed if you don't have a session or two about that disintegration of England and how that will impact on us.
What would you say about it? What would you say about it?
I don't have the answers.
Okay, or even just some initial thoughts?
The initial thoughts are, you're seeing things are getting worse for the English people, for the English working class, and by that I mean the vast majority of the population. Voting behaviour is bizarre by the standards of everybody in this room. That is going to have an impact in Scotland, and I don't know what the impact is, but it will impact. It'll be like, and we need to start thinking about how that follows on. And like the lady there was talking about there, we're seeing it. I mean, like independent support is higher than ever it has. So therefore, the lack of a Scottish media, and I don't quite mean this, I'm throwing it as a thought, the lack of a Scottish media hasn't caused a decrease in support for independence.
No.
So there's a dissonance there.
Well, it's Alf Baird was actually talking about that yesterday, so I'm going to try and pull us back to some of the principles that we're not used to, basing our discussions on. But if you followed the whole argument yesterday, you realise those are the only principles that really matter. Colonialism has a purpose, which is plunder and exploitation. And it has a modus operandum, which is psychological, entirely psychological. When you look at what fires people up, so Alf had a different way of expressing it, but it's the same thing that says that people vote values, not policies. What inspires people? What moves them? Once you, psychologically, when you have an emotional reaction, and he also talked about this, if I feed you a false fact, and I do it in a way that you have an emotional reaction to that fact, your brain will code that as truth, and you will then push against the facts that might disabuse you of this false idea. It's become an emotional truth. So we have to turn that around. So the first thing when we talk about reaching people is, what do we reach them with? No matter what method we use, no matter what mechanisms we're using, what are we going to reach them with? So we know that Scotland can be so much wealthier and, independence is normal. I know that's true. I believe that 100%. But it's not going to get anybody going. What will? How do we identify what will? And Alf has, I'll just finish this. Alf has put this various ways clearly, and we have to implement that, I think, and begin here, begin with us, work this out. Now, anybody who knows me knows how passionate I am about the fact that Scotland has a constitution that most people don't know about, and that which guarantees a political setup that can deliver our people from the poverty and the desperation and the abuse, because that is what it is. It is the abuse of the privileged, by the privileged, of the many who do not have that privilege. The entitlement, the imposition of policies and values that we do not share and do not want because they matter and we don't. We have a remedy for that. We see that all over the world. We have a remedy for that. How do we make that simple for people? How do we turn that back into, this is what's available for you? So, 3 things that we need to know. Cultural identity is part of that. Who are you? That's why independence matters. What do we have to offer that isn't just the word independence? We can do better. Independence is normal. What do we have to offer for a world in crisis? And that, Scotland is in crisis like much of the rest of the world. What do we have to offer? What is the balm, the solve for that crisis? Can we put that out simply? And then, and only then, can we galvanize people? Can we electrify people with what we can offer, how we can offer it, and what binds us together?
Sarah, can I come in on this and to answer your question? So media is certainly part of the answer, because the reason Scotland has sleepwalked for so long, and despite all the damage Brexit was going to do, and the fact that 62% of Scots voted against it, and yet they've meekly accepted that somehow our neighbour can override our wishes and that somehow we live in a democracy. Well, that's not a democracy. And the world saw that. In fact, the impression I got from the people at EFTA that we met is they were wondering, when is Scotland going to get off its arse and do something? Why are you taking this? Why are you just going along with it? So I think, so the next steps, media is very important. It's not true that people are not watching television. They actually watch more television now than they did before. It's the method of delivering what they're watching that's maybe changed. Now, yeah, Sarah's right. I've been working on something now, actually since before 2018. I tried to negotiate with STV, started to contact them about buying what was STV2. It was 5 local terrestrial transmitters, local television stations. It's now owned with a company called That's TV, which is based in Manchester. It makes no local news. These licenses are exclusive. They're public service broadcast licenses, but they're obviously commercially funded, so you've got to fund it yourself. But the requirement is you must make 1 hour of original news, non-repeating in prime time every day. He's not doing that. So I'm suing Ofcom, and I have a half-day hearing on the 8th of July in London with the Competition Appeal Tribunal because they have failed to protect the public interest. The public interest, in this case, is that it's a requirement to produce a minimum of 1 hour of local news, non-repeating, in these licenses. Ofcom's got a legal duty to enforce that and to make sure it's being delivered. That's not been happening. Thanks to my arguments and my legal fight that's been going on for now over a year, Ofcom found this company in breach of 14 out of 20 licenses back in December. Then just so happens, it's called a pincer movement, and Mark knows because I've had long conversations with him. It took a huge amount of work to produce the 764-page submission and get it into order and make it make sense and all of that. I've done this before, and I won and created case law in 2010 when I was fighting B-Sky B and access to Sky Sports 1 and 2 and Ofcom. They had lots of lawyers and QCs, and there was just little old me from Scotland with no law degree, with a giant suitcase of 60 kilos worth of paperwork, all cross-referenced that I could now destroy you with. I researched the judge. The judge was a High Court judge. I found a wonderful speech that he had made 6 months before, talking about the competition in the marketplace is healthy and good, and the benefits trickle down to the consumers and improve everything. I thought, oh, I like this. Copy, paste. It's one of the things I presented. And when, of course, I got to that point, I'm looking up at this judge, and he's nodding and smiling, and I thought, yeah, I know they're your words from 6 months ago. To cut a long story short, I won the case. It created case law, and I was against the best lawyers money could throw it. In fact, the same law firm was used by Sky that was used for the post office cases, which didn't surprise me one bit. So I'm doing it again. Also, the licenses are up for renewal. So they can be extended now. They all run out on the 25th of November. But a piece of legislation was passed in December while you were all preparing for Christmas. There was work going on down there. They finally passed this little piece of legislation which allows Ofcom to extend these licenses by another 10 years. By 10 years from now, terrestrial TV will be dead. There will be no terrestrial transmissions anymore, because the vast majority of people are now online, using YouTube, using streaming services, all of this. However, the strange thing is, the actual television viewing has gone up. The average viewer in Scotland, average person in Scotland, watches 4.3 hours of television a day. That's the number from Ofcom. Nearly 4.5 hours a day they're watching television. So the idea that it's not important, totally wrong. And the reason the British don't want Scotland to have its own television channel, and the reason David Cameron in 2014 wrote to Sony Pictures Television and told them how it would be very unhelpful if this new drama series called Outlander was shown on British television at this time. I've got a copy of the letter, so I found it. So the fact is, it's extremely important. So the next steps, so media is part of the next step. The politicians are way behind where we all are. SNP, they're not trying to deliver independence at all. Where are they? We invited them. We invited all 129 MSPs to either come for free and represent their party, or we'll give them a free stall. Nobody from the SNP's here. So they have no intention of delivering independence. And they've made classic mistakes. I was totally against the BBC Scotland channel. In fact, that was the last legal fight I had about Ofcom. I lost that on jurisdiction because it was a new BBC service. Anyway, my argument against why that channel was a bad idea for Scotland, and it was amazing how many people thought it was great, another choice, more programmes. I thought, no, it's a very bad idea because it's more hours of programming of news and current affairs from the same source that we already have. And BBC has over 40% market share in news in Scotland. Over 40% of news consumption in Scotland comes from the BBC. Now, Rupert Murdoch, lots of people don't like him.
Sorry to intervene, but I was going to come back to
Yeah,
Sarah.
can I finish my point, please?
Sarah was making a point about Alfaire's book. I was just wanting to make a
Yeah.
simple point about
Let
Alfaire's
him go
book.
quick. Let him go quickly. I'm sorry. 'Cause
Okay,
I know
right.
you-
Sorry, because I'm not saying what you're saying relevant, but I'm talking about, Sarah was talking about Alfaire's book and the material in it. What I intend to do, there's another silo within the independence movement. It's the younger generation of which there are no one here. That's not a criticism, that's an observation. The Rick folk, as I'll call them, the likes of the Conter people, I'm going to buy a copy of Al's book, I'm going to give it to them because they're in another silo, and I want to see their analysis of Alf's book, because I think that will be enriching. I'm not going to say they're going to turn around and devastate it or anything like there, but I think they have a contribution to make about the stuff that Sarah in Al's book is talking about. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you.
Well, that does pick up what I was about to get onto. So the youth who are not genuinely watching the BBC, but the voters that we've been trying to convince that Scotland should be independent, guess where they get their news from? The BBC. The
D and C one, yes, that's been the case since
And-
the
oh, and-
University did the research
Yes.
in the 1970s when it was doing
we're not in the 1970s now.
Sorry, there's been no evidence produced, we can check every 2 years with psychologists, on the determinants of the social class of those who favour independence. The Girl University did the research.
Yes, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about people that where they get their news from.
Social class impacts on where they get their news from. These and the C ones, their independence vote hasn't changed for 40 years.
But that's not what we're talking about here. What I'm talking about is, we're talking about what the next stages are in television, whether it's important or not. People think it's not important. It is important. It is important because if you haven't got an ability to get the message out or report accurately on a news item, such as what we're doing here, we sent out a press release last week. The Scotsman, we understand, on Thursday online reported pretty accurately on what we were doing here. It seems very positive, actually. The National hasn't done anything on it. So you can read into that what you...
Surprise.
Yeah. BBC, of course, I would be very shocked if they turned up with an OB truck. We sent it to the Brussels Times, the Washington Post, because what we're doing here isn't just for our benefit. This is to get the message out way beyond Scotland's borders, because this is about gathering people's attention in the international community. Because independence doesn't happen if it's not recognised somewhere else. You're not independent. You might think you are, but you're not. So I believe, and this is what I wanted to finish, so television, there's an opportunity to create a new television channel in Scotland using the existing legislation. And that is what I'm working on. And it will take at least a year before it can launch. It's not about, news loses a lot of money. It doesn't make any money. It loses money. So news is a loss maker, but it's very important. So if you're a commercial channel, you have to therefore do things that are commercially attractive, that will get you an audience that you can make money out of. Part of that money is commercials and selling it. Part of it might be subscriptions, sponsorship, you name it. All of that. But what I see for Scotland isn't inward, isn't concentrating on itself. It's being part of a new media company that will identify the next Outlander 2 series and do a joint venture with an American studio, rather than the American studio making it on its own, create hundreds of jobs in Scotland and help build skills, and sell it, because we all speak English, and the world for English television programming is enormous. That's the recipe for making a successful adventure. And so that's what I'm part of, and that will become clear in the next few months as we publish details.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I may tell you a little story first, and then the question follows on from the story. Some years ago, I was down on the Kirkcaldy High Street. I think it was with the Yes Group at one of the street stalls. And I was handing out leaflets on independence. And a lady, I said, would you be interested? No, I am British. I said, excuse me, madam, but you can't be British. Yes, I can. I am British. I said, well, the way I look at it, when the Treaty of Union took place, the Scottish Parliament was abolished, but the English Parliament merely adjourned and then reconvened as the English Parliament, continuing as the Parliament of Britain. I said, as such, a Parliament of Britain has never been formed, so British is a lie. You can only be English or Scottish. And she looked at me quite amazed. And I saw her actually sitting on a bench further up the street, and she was thinking about it. And she came back and she said, is that true? And I said, yes, it is. You can check it. Now, maybe if we went to people and said, do you know you're not British? You are either Scottish or English. That's the choice you have. Do you think they might sit up and listen?
I'd like to respond a little bit to that. I think consistent with what Alf Baird said. And I'm thinking of my own dad, who was born in Scotland and lived here till he was about 13, and left, had to leave, and well, you know, he just didn't have economic opportunity here, and he left, and he became very anglicized, and went on to become an Anglican minister, and then he went to the United States, and he left the Anglican Church. He became a Unitarian minister, but he was very anglicized. And I think he always thought of himself as British, largely. He had his Scottish identity. I wouldn't say British predominated, but it was a mix. It wasn't quite as simple as you know, either Scottish or English. And my main point being is that I think that what Alf was talking about is how the kind of the social determinants of how people voted, you know, largely in the last referendum, largely was based on national identity. I say, well, I'm Scottish, so I'm going to vote for independent Scotland. Other people say, well, I'm more British, so I'm going to vote for the Union. I mean, the sentiment exists. I mean, you can't.
Social class.
Yeah, I understand all that.
The areas where the yes vote was, areas where there's poverty. Social class.
I'm not disputing that. All I'm saying is that I think that we need, even for those who consider themselves British, we have to offer them an opportunity, you know, to say, well, look, you know, we accept, you define yourself how you want. You know, we don't care how you define yourself, but we want to, you know, create an independent Scotland that is for your benefit, no matter how you identify yourself. That was my main point. Yeah.
I'm going to make things interesting and disagree.
Okay, go ahead. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for.
So,
go ahead.
I'm going to come back to, you know, Alf is one of my heroes because he framed the world for me in a way that it had never been framed before. I had been very interested in colonialism because of the work of Paulo Freire and, you know, and education and a wonderful man called Dr. Whitehead, who developed this notion of internal colonialism within the classroom, of education as a form of colonialism. But I'd never seen my world the way that Alf showed me my world. And I think that it shouldn't, that change of perception shouldn't live up here while we go back to talk about things in the same way we've always talked about them. We need to shift how we talk.
Can I bring in Yvonne here? So Yvonne is a journalist. Now don't throw things, okay?
Well, hang on. Let me finish saying what I was going
can
to
we
say about Mark.
yeah.
Because, and this business of class.
Mm.
Okay? So what Alf taught us, and then I will hand over with great pleasure. What Alf has shown us is this. He showed us this argument, psychological argument. Those who have emotionally identified as British do not want to hear the argument that, well, you can be British. Well, that's a lie. But you can be British and in favour of independence. No, you can't, because British is English. It's never been anything else. There is no such thing. We can prove it over and over again. If you look up the British Constitution, you'll get Magna Carta. If you look up the British Parliament, you'll get it from the time that it was established in England. If you look up British monarchs, you'll have English monarchs. You look up British literature, you'll have English authors. British was a term before there was ever a union, and it always meant England.
Well, Breton. Well, it comes from Britain or Breton.
But they adopted it.
Anyway.
Where it comes from matters not. It was when the Tudors adopted it, and Great Britain was the term formed at the time of Elizabeth I to describe the English empire. Scotland didn't have an empire. It had a trading community that it was part of. Now, the British, the ones who want to be English, these are the equivalent of what Fanon talks about when he speaks about black faces, white masks. I experienced it in America with the white faces, red face, white heart. They're the same thing. This is colonialism. Forget it. Forget the wannabe Brits, because it is diametrically opposed to want to be English and part of the empire and all of that, rah, 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 and to want Scotland to be independent and, more importantly, truly liberated, so that the Scotland that once existed and was interrupted by the Union can recover and modernise and be that Scotland and not England, which means not British. The class thing is absolutely vitally important, because it is among the poorest in Scotland, the working classes, the ones that don't sit in wine bars pontificating on our next steps and discussing the theory of this and the theory of that, the ones that are wondering how the hell they're going to come up with the money for the meter in the middle of winter, how the hell they're going to feed the kids so they will not eat, but if they get ill then the kids have no one to look after them, how the hell they're going to get through the next winter. There's no jobs, they've all been outsourced, there's no decent housing. We know this, but actually we probably don't. You probably need to go into one of your local housing schemes like Abbey View and have a wee look if you want to see what we're talking about when we talk about people on the edge of desperation or past it. Those are the independence voters. Those are the people with a stake in the future, with a stake in change, real change. Nobody else has that stake. As long as we're a wee bit comfortable, we do not have that amount of investment in such a radical change. They do. And nobody is speaking for them. One of the reasons I hate our politicians, the vast majority of them, is the way that they sit in their ivory tower while people are literally dying of poverty. And do they have a say? So I'll tell you where I've come to personally. I don't give a damn about the political chatterati anymore. All these words, who do they reach? Who do they get to? Will it save one person's life who's on the streets in winter? Because we don't, in this day and age, we don't have decent social policy that makes sure everybody has a house and enough to eat. It won't. Nothing. All that will save those lives is if we actually deliver not just independence, because by God, if we free Holyrood from the control of Westminster, we'll not see any fewer homeless people, any fewer desperate people, any more genuine jobs in Scotland, any more equal distribution of wealth than we've got now. And I'm not interested in that kind of independence. So I care about hearing from the people who have skin in the game, as they say in America, the ones who've got a genuine stake in Scotland. And I think that's also part of where we look at, not just, and this is the really important thing, not just where we take our message. You know, my husband was Cherokee, and he, more than once I heard them tell the story of the Blessed Heart people, or the Bless Your Heart people, rather. And these people, these do-gooders, who would go into Native American communities and say, vote for us, we're going to make everything okay for you. At one point, and I forget which president it was, came onto the reservation in Pine Ridge and brought a whole bunch of computers. Oh, I know, it was Clinton. Brought a whole pile of computers and all sorts of things to go with it. But they had no Wi-Fi. And they didn't have any way of connecting them up. The bless your heart people, we're going to save you. We're going to do this. They're full of words and promises, but they don't ask the people they're going to save how they need to be saved and what they need. So, from that's my argument against Mark. I don't care anymore about the dwindling importance of a dwindling middle class with a voice so much louder than its actual size that it's practically obscene. While the vast majority of people in Scotland are voiceless, and there's another lot that are silent, and they're the ones that are bringing in free ports and taking away our rights and siphoning off the profits that actually belong to the people of Scotland. So I want a different way of coming at this.
I stand corrected. Peter, please.
I listened to Sarah there and totally agreeing with her about where the votes are coming from, if I could put it, where the support for independence has to come from. It is from people who normally don't vote, the people who are disenchanted with politics, disillusioned and disconnected from politics. The question is, how do you motivate these people? And I will tell you, you do not motivate them by promising them something better, because they've heard all those promises before.
Exactly.
How you will motivate these people is by identifying the enemy, identify the thing that is causing their problem, and they will rise against that thing. You have to give them something to be against and a reason to be angry and somewhere to point that anger. And the thing you identify as the enemy is the union. You be against the union. We need an anti-union campaign. That we never had for the 2014 referendum. We got into this rut of trying to sell independence like a luxury holiday destination, and we did not get people motivated to end the union.
Yeah.
Mark, so
The problem here is, half of Scotland is in the union. That is the problem.
No, at the moment it's slightly less than half Scotland, because the latest polls that have been appearing are actually giving the independents a majority vote. I mean, it used to be that
You've still got a lot in
had
the union.
45% for yes and 42% for no, but the difference of don't knows would have swayed it. But now it's come round to the point where they're sitting at about something like, I think it's 54% for yes, and it's about 41% for no, and the difference of the don't knows, even if they all voted against independence, it wouldn't win. Independence.
things have...
That's what the latest
yeah.
polls are showing.
And
But the thing is, how do you get that action and actually get it up there so that people do it, not just say it?
so
Might help if people could believe a single word that
Yeah.
their candidates are saying.
can I try and, before we get the next question, bring back, to answer your point, so there's a lot of change since 2014, you know? And one of the biggest changes has been, for instance, the party that's taken the majority of the votes in Scotland since 2014, the SNP, have betrayed both Scotland and independence. Instead, they have engaged themselves in transgender ideology, missing money, and leadership that has allowed, in fact, encouraged the abuse of its own elected politicians, so that the best politicians they did have all now left politics. So I have no time for the SNP anymore. They have had opportunity after opportunity, and they have done nothing. And they're still doing nothing. And now we've got a facsimile of a leader who stands there and tells everybody that he won't do anything on independence until support is 75%. And how are you going to get it to 75% if you're not going to do anything? We'll be stuck in this quagmire for another 50 years at this state. So I've watched it with interest. I know a lot of people are going to vote for it. So somebody asked about the next steps. The next step is the election next year. Somebody asked me yesterday how they think they should vote. It's not for me to tell people how to vote. I will not be voting for the SNP ever again. My original instincts were absolutely right. And I changed that in 2014, and I started voting for them, and I joined them in 2014, and I voted for them. I was a party member and a secretary and an organiser. I was part of getting Joanna Cherry elected at least twice. I look back at those 10 years, and part of me regrets getting involved at all because of how much money it cost me, how much time it took. I mean, I was out every weekend for 7 years. I helped raise thousands of pounds for them. It's a total betrayal of everybody that joined what was a movement when Alex Salmond was the minister. He's got a lot of things I could blame him for. One of them was getting me interested in independence. And it's true. So the next steps are, and there's many things that we can disagree on and why people vote, people don't vote. The biggest danger to Scottish politics and politics in the UK is that people are disengaging. They are fed up with it. And the SNP is to blame for that in Scotland. The turnouts are dropping dramatically. People have heard all these problems. Just one more vote. I mean, how many front pages of the National have we seen that said, it's just around the corner, fix the date, mark it in your diary? All of it was a lie. It was all a lie. There's at least 20 to 30 front pages of it.
Did you see the photos out there of all of the different national, the one that's supposed to be in favor of independence, headline after headline after headline.
And incidentally, coming back to broadcasting, the SNP supported the launch of the BBC channel. And I thought, how insane can you be? The clue is in the name. British Broadcasting Corporation, Scotland.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here.
Oh, no.
Farage and Reform, they're speaking to the disenfranchised. They're speaking to the angry people, certainly down south.
Did you say Reform?
Some of that is going to happen here in Scotland. People they have become disenfranchised, they have become angry. It's how to speak to them. It's how to speak to them without blaming immigrants, perhaps blaming the union, being really forthright. I don't know how we can do that because he's had the biggest share of the airtime possible, and that's why he is where he is. But maybe we should take some things from what he's saying. Everything he's saying about immigration, we should be in more control of our borders. Hello, Scotland can say the same. So maybe we should mimic some of what he's saying. Maybe. Frame it better, maybe, but there are things to learn from what he's doing.
Well, you just need to look at the airtime given to Nigel Farage. You know, a man who had one MP elected in the Parliament, and he was on every other week on Question Time, spouting his bile, and this is the thing that we need to do as part of the next step, is to capture the media. Now, the media in Scotland at the moment is deplorable. And they're not getting the audience that you think that they're getting either. The National, if you have a look at its circulation figures,
Tiny.
it is tiny.
But it's the only paper that's going up.
It's,
Circulation is actually going up.
Well,
going.
It's not much, but it's going up. That's a fact.
I will check the ABC figures then about that, but it's certainly not what it was when it first launched. And you have to wonder, why isn't the National at this event? If it's about independence, they should be here. This has been an excellent weekend. And what you've uncovered on this platform this weekend is you've unearthed an unexploded bomb before the world. That should be headline news. It's been sitting there ticking away for centuries. And thanks to Sarah, David, Mark, we now know about it. We've listened to the legal experts and people with gravitas who've had something to say about this great find. You know, independence is within our reach now, but Craig Murray is right when he says we're not going to get it handed on a plate to us. We are going to have to take it.
Yeah.
And that is going to be the next step. Do we take it by force? What is the next step? These are really important times to lift Scotland from being some junior member of a forced union, and that is what we're going to have to do, and we won't get it with the media. And by the way, with elections coming now, chapping on doors is not going to work anymore. You chap on a door in Glasgow, they think it's the debt collector, they hide in the corner. You know, people are afraid when strangers come knocking on the door. We're going to have to completely change the way that we do elections. And it will happen overnight, just in the way that David says that young people are no longer watching television. They're watching screens. They're watching, ask them where they get the news from. I've got 2 teenage boys at home. They get their news from TikTok. I could tear my hair out. 50 years in journalism, and this is what it's come to. 15 seconds on TikTok. But it's something that I did in my last election campaign. I had some young kid who was very handy with Facebook, TikTok, all of that. And he got me over 2 million hits on one 30-second piece of video. So, we are going to have to waken up our own ideas and look at the way that we start to campaign. And chapping on doors is not going to be the way to do it in the next election.
Yes, sir.
Just to get back to what the lady was saying on the floor about the form, what I can experience, I work in care a lot of the time to get as a day job, and I flit about different places because I'm part of an agency. I'm working in Fife, or I'm working in Dundee, or I'm working out in Argyll. So I'm flitting about and I'm chatting to folk at work, and I'm getting one, like everybody's saying, people just switched off completely to politics. Very clued into social media, very buffet sort of nonsense stuff, this distraction stuff that you get, mass media stuff. People are really into it. That's what a lot of the chat and the focus is. And then a lot of it as well, there is a thing with the reform where they're tapping into a lot of anxieties, rightly or wrongly, about immigration. There's a big demographic shift that's happened in the last 5 years, and everybody at work is saying something about it. That's their chat, that's the attention, because the world they live in is changing, better or worse. For me, I've stayed in London, Vancouver, My wife's like a different race, so for me this is like healthy, happy. But that's not the majority of people. And we've got to own that. We've got to actually address people's realities. Just like a lot of people are worried about white settlers coming up, sorry for the last speaker, coming up to England, that manifested itself in the yes vote. A lot of people are talking about that, but it was just shoved under the carpet. That's not how a lot of yes supporters think. There's a big disconnect with what yes supporters are saying and what the high heatsons are saying. And you touched on it a wee bit, Sarah, but a lot of it's not quite palatable. That's one thing you have to accept. I'm not saying you have to agree, but there has to be a response, and there has to be not. You can't talk down to them for having their views.
No, it's right. I want to ask Yvonne something that is I've got 3 questions. So the first is, you and Sandy have both illustrated what Peter was saying. People are angry, people are frightened, people are desperate, and they have no voice, no power, nowhere to go with that. So they need an enemy, they need someone to blame. And we have been led by our media, which is so trustworthy, isn't it, guys, really? To blame immigrants. The other. It is called othering. Othering. And it is not about your class. It is about your level of fear, desperation, and anxiety. And that is what makes you susceptible.
We'll give him a round of applause when he comes back. When he. Yay! Now that's a rookie mistake. Yes, that's what we were hearing. Now,
This TV.
the good news.
My contribution to the debate.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The good news is that Mark has made himself famous internationally for all the wrong reasons, and he just flushed his career down the toilet. And I saw him going out. I thought, oh, please tell me you've switched the microphone. That happens a lot, believe it or not, on film and TV.
We heard him. We know he did.
Film and TV, that happens a lot. You watch the sound men on film sets and the actors and that. I have heard it once or twice. And they go off room and they're bitching about each other. Well, wow, it's amazing. So the last quarter certified 2,500 readers or copies of the National. Does that include digital?
That's
It must be.
circulation average per issue of the National is 2,568. It's not viable.
No.
It's not viable.
And it makes no impact whatsoever, except it's an SNP publication. Hence why
I want to come back on
I'm sure you do.
Can I hang on?
Excuse
I had a
me.
question.
Hold on, and
I was in the
excuse me.
middle of a question.
I'm sure
Can I
you do.
finish?
I'm sure you do. But the
Am
fact
I
is,
going to be allowed to come back in with the point about the National? When you finish
Yes.
the point about the National.
Yes.
And then I want to put the point about the form.
Hang on,
Well,
guys. I was in the middle.
there's other people
I've
in the
got
room
three
as
well. When it's
questions
your
for-
turn.
I've got
So-
3 questions for Yvonne I'd like to finish. And I know they're a wee bit long, but I think they're really important. Peter Bell is absolutely correct when he says that what unites people, what gives them a focus, is an enemy, is someone to blame. So this, I think, has been absolutely cynical, that people are being led, and Reform is being helped by the BBC and the British establishment to do this. They're being led to those who are coming here because of British policy abroad, which is making the world unlivable for so many of those who are coming here, causing wars and exploitation and all the rest of it. So my first question is, do you think that there is a way to move that focus. As I said, it's not a class thing. It's anybody who is desperate, anybody who is afraid, anybody who is angry needs someone to blame. Doesn't matter where you come from. Can we move, and by the way, that also takes care of the, don't talk down to people for their views. I don't believe those are their views. Those are views fed to them in order to direct that animosity and that need for someone to blame away from those who really are to blame. Can we move it? Can we identify the real enemy here?
Well,
and the second question is, are you going to stand again?
I've got a lovely life in the borders, but I consider myself working class. It's in my DNA. It's, to me, there are two classes, the working classes and the sneering classes. And forget your ABC, 1D, E2s and all of that. That's something that's been invented by some posh boy from Eton in a marketing company. Let's make things simple. We do have an enemy, and it is the traditional enemy. It's the rich, not just the people who we perceive to be rich, but the fabulously rich, the billionaires, the ones that are surrounding Donald Trump at the moment and raking in the money. We're told that you see headline news of a woman who might have forgotten to stop claiming something of our welfare benefits, and she ends up in court with a criminal record. And 2 or 3 investigators have spent weeks, if not months, following her around and building up a case. And it's probably cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to get this woman in court because she's been skimming £9 a week off the state. And yet you've got the billionaires who are evading the taxes and not paying taxes. These are the real criminals.
Yes.
And who's looking into them? Because it would take the same amount of man hours and the same amount of people. But the rich and the privileged can come and do what they want. They can come, we saw it with that Lady Moan.
Yes, Lady Moan.
And during the COVID crisis, people losing their loved ones, and she was raking in millions. She is the enemy, not the woman who's claiming £9 extra allowance here and there, but the society that we're living in at the moment. The governments are criminalising the little people, our people, and it's the sneering classes that are driving it forwards, and they're the ones that we need to unmask. And am I standing? Well, yes, I will be standing in the Holyrood elections.
Don't take me over, I'll be voting for you. Just to ask Yvonne to expand that a little bit, coming back to, I can't support the meme, let's end the union, because, as you know, there is no union. So we have to find a way of expressing that. Let's end the sneering classes would suit me fine, but that might be taken the wrong way. But how do we, so we need to have a message about, this is the enemy, we need to remove that enemy. Do you think we can develop that in a way that is simple, straightforward? The people that, coming across in small boats are not the enemy. The refugees, the asylum seekers are not the enemy. The woman that that is taking £9 a week too much is not the enemy. The enemy of the people is the people who are making that happen. That's the British establishment. Could we come up with a campaign for Scotland that expresses that, do you think?
I think what we need to do is to really turn in on the momentum that Reform has got at the moment. Because Reform isn't a party that belongs in Scotland. Yeah. There's no room in Scotland for the likes of Reform. For me, living in Scotland, I've come across the most enlightened people when it comes to immigration. You know, I see these people coming over on boats, and it's broken my heart, so much so that I've contacted the local council, and now I'm fostering 2 unaccompanied teenagers who came over on a boat. They're not criminals, they're kids with aspirations. And we shouldn't be punishing them. And we keep hearing, oh, this isn't against them, this is against the people smugglers. The people smugglers, from what I can understand, are very few and far between. Yes, there are criminal gangs involved, but these criminal gangs go right the way to the top. They're not on the boats. They don't even buy the boats. You know, it's like the drug dealers that we hear about that are so far up the food chain that by the time they've washed their money, they're sitting next to the politicians in Parliament. You know, these are the real villains that we ought to be looking at with suspicion. Not the ordinary people coming over on boats. I mean, think about it. What would it take for you to sit on one of those boats and take your chance coming across the channel? You know, people wouldn't do it for £1 million. You know, it's just madness. But these kids are leaving hopelessness behind, and they're dreamers, and they're coming over with dreams, and you know, we should not squash their dreams when they arrive here. We should be, you know, thank you for choosing our country, and if you've got the initiative to come thousands of miles and make it safely, then you've obviously got something that makes you special and have the potential to really contribute something wonderful to the country. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not bothered with the national point, it's about the forum.
Sir, Peter's first, sir.
Oh, it's my fault.
The problem with this kind of event is that the discussion flits about from place to place. I have got something to say on every aspect of that, but by the time I get up to speak, I've forgotten what they all were. Yvonne is right. I'm going to address a couple of things, and I'm going to be brief. Yvonne is right. There are only 2 classes. Those 2 classes are the powerful and the powerless. And I could speak for a long time about the whole business of power and how it's acquired and how it's held. Tony Benn's 5 questions, the prevailing power and countervailing power. There's a lot to be said about that, but this is not the time and the place. On Farage, why does Farage get a disproportionate amount of coverage in the media? It's because he's newsworthy. It's because he says things that are worth reporting, that they fill in time. He makes a spectacle of himself. He stands out. So he's newsworthy. That's why he gets on the news.
He also does the job of directing people's attention to those the British establishment can't directly attack.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But he makes himself newsworthy. Reform is being successful because they're disruptors. They are the disruptor. And when people are disillusioned with what we might call traditional politics, they turn to the disruptor. They've done that all through history. But the thing that I actually really wanted to say originally was about the SNP. And I agree with, you see people getting really angry when the topic of the SNP comes up, and I'm not surprised. I would not disagree with anything that has been said about the SNP. failure and betrayal. That's what the SNP's been about for the last 10 years. I'd had the applause if I were you, because there's a but to that. And the but is that being realistic, the SNP is going to be the dominant force in Scottish politics for as long as it matters. And if we're talking specifically about the 2026 election, it doesn't matter how much we rail against the SNP in a room like this. The 2026 election, SNP is still going to be the dominant force in the Scottish Parliament. So if we want to take any next steps, we are going to have to get the SNP forced to take those steps with us. We cannot just forget them. We cannot just set them aside. They are going to be there. We have to change them.
Mark, we also have a gentleman right at the very back. There's that gentleman, and then the gentleman right at the very back.
I think I think we're drifting off in other very important subjects. We've got to focus back on decolonising Scotland, and what the panel what the panel have been saying is correct. But the situation we find ourselves in just now, however unfortunate we might find that reform are having political success, and rather than be sneering about it, we've got to find out why are they successful. I think people feel disenfranchised, mainly in England, but it's starting to spread here to Scotland. And we've got to understand that and not just ignore it and turn away and pretend that we're, you know, whiter than white and we don't get involved in these dirty politics. So we've got to understand why it's happening and why they're gaining support. And the message of decolonisation is a fantastic message, but it has to be given a reality in people's lives. And I disagree with you saying don't knock on people's doors. With very rare exceptions, I've never been punched in the face going to doors. People do not get...
Further away with that.
Yeah, people do not get unsolicited calls on doors now. It used to be lots of people were trying to sell things. It's very rare that people go to doors to sell things. And most people are quite surprised when you go to a door and ask them their political opinion. They're only too receptive to either say they're not interested or they are interested. So going to doors is highly successful, and it's worked in the past and it will work in the future. We cannot get access, much as David wants to any form of media. Any form of media. And even if the National only sold 10 copies, it still appears in every Tesco supermarket as you walk in the door. The front page is full of the propaganda that the British state delivered to us. So it doesn't matter what it costs. I don't know if you're aware, but David Coulthard, right, the racing driver, was offered £1 million to take the Scottish flag off his helmet, right, his crashing helmet. So it's not a mistake that every product that the supermarket sells got a Union Jack on them. So we've got to counter that and understand that the British state, who are the enemy, are terrified of Scotland becoming politically aware. As it's starting to happen now, thanks to people like you. So keep up the good work.
Can I just come back to you on that, because you're absolutely right. And when I used to subscribe to the National when it first launched, I thought it was a great development. And then I've watched it turn into a comic, because all those front covers that promised that independence was just around the corner and just one more mandate, how many Nicola Sturgeon front pages were there? Where was their coverage as a journalist and a journalist outlet? Where was their coverage when it appeared that the money had gone missing? They're the one newspaper that totally ignored it. Now, all these newspapers have an agenda. The National should be as it claims on its mast, the paper that supports independence. There's no sign that that's the case at all. In fact, quite the opposite. All under one banner. Where was their coverage of all under one banner? Very minimal. We've invited them here. Where are they? The last time we did this, in 2022, they were also invited. They didn't send anybody. They then asked us after the time, because we were very busy, no one was more surprised how popular it was than us. And the place, we ran out of spaces. We had to get more chairs in. It was that busy. The National then contacted us and said, would we write an article about our own event? And have we got any pictures? I mean, yes, we've got pictures. So that's how an article appeared. We wrote it ourselves. That's not journalism. That's called advertising. So it's massively, so we don't have any independent supporting mainstream media. None. Because if we did, we would see them all the time. It's an in-house publication. It promotes only the SNP. It got rid of ALBA writers. It's imported, in fact, it's got an editorial team that pushes the transgender policy. That hasn't got anything to do with Scottish independence. And yet that's what it says on it. And coming back to what, and I do watch with increasing anxiety how successful people's attention is being diverted to reform. Reform, you're right, it's a protest, but it's playing on people's fears, and it's stoking fears. It has no decent policies. It's got no idea what it's going to do the moment it got elected. In fact, God help Little Britain if they do become the next leading party. They're not a government, a serious political organisation for government. They've got no proper policies, and apparently if you fall out and disagree with Nigel Farage, he excommunicates you and kicks you out the party, as one of their MPs found out. So listen, political parties are meant to be about debate. SNP, when I joined it, used to have fantastic conferences. They were massive. They were oversubscribed. There wasn't a single seat available in the main hall. There was thousands of people that had them. And it was invigorating, and it was interesting to discuss serious issues and what we wanted to know. And that disappeared. By 2018, it almost vanished. By 2019, it had gone. And that's when the decline rapidly started. Their numbers started disappearing. The people that would turn up to conferences, it shrunk and shrunk. Now there's no debate allowed. There's no proper policies coming out of it. It's being hollowed out. And the reason I react like this when somebody tries to defend the SNP over the last 10 years and the National trying to claim that that's somehow a journalistic Bible, when there's no journalism in it. You look, there's no journalism in it. It's run on press releases. Newspapers are meant to challenge people in power. They're meant to hold them to account. They're not just meant to be a front cover photocopy of whatever the latest First Minister has just decided is new. Oh, I'm healing the SNP. What are you talking about? First of all, I didn't know it was sick. So why is it needing to be healed? And then this nonsense about it'll now be 75%. Why aren't they holding his feet to the account? Say, no, it's 50% plus 1. What are you going to do? Why aren't they asking the difficult questions? What are you going to do to make sure that the majority of people support it? No, there's no difficult questions at all. That's a journalist's job, is to do, for you and I, ask the questions that we want answered, but we haven't got access to them. That's their job. It's not happening.
Can I come back to the next steps?
Yes, please do.
So I just wanted to summarize what I have heard here. So I have heard, and this is my takeaway from this, what I'm putting together, and I invite other people to do this with me. We look at reform. Reform is making headway. Why is it making headway? Because it's making headway with those who are afraid and angry and desperate, and needing somebody to blame. People need somebody to blame. That's a human psychological need. Reform is doing the job of the British establishment. Newsworthy or not, it is giving the British establishment a mouthpiece, a vehicle through which it can direct people's rage and fear and othering at not the real enemy, which is the steering classes, the powerful, the British establishment, but the most vulnerable, the most powerless. So reform is being used, in my view, by the British establishment to provide a direction, an absolutely despicable and dishonest direction for the fear and the anger and the desperation of people who have been reduced to that state by the behaviour of the British establishment. Can we turn that around? I think we can. I think Peter's right. I don't think it's end the Union, Peter, but I think it's identify the real enemy, which is the British establishment. It is the establishment of this colonising power, calling itself the Union that doesn't exist. It is that class that is desperately pointing the people who are powerless against each other and against others who are powerless. And in a way, that is almost like a modern class struggle, if you like. But colonisation is the enemy. The administering power is responsible for that. We have to be able to take a page out of Reform's book, turn it to Scotland's favour and use it. I don't say I know how, but I think if you start to see maybe we can do this, then ultimately we can do that. Yes?
Hi, it's maybe not that relevant, the question, but awful lot of work in, devastated we didn't get it. SNP have obviously let us down completely. But from out there explaining to people of all ages, from the young right up to the old, how to vote, and is it possible to explain to them how to vote tactically? Do we keep the optics of get the whole indie majority? You know, like tactical voting, whatever you do, second vote, it's got to be, in my view now, Alba. And in any marginal seats, do you vote SNP? Because if it's going to be marginal, do you want a Tory in, do you want Labour in? I know that statistics might be that just, as Peter quite rightly said, SNP are a force, but and is it relevant because I believe this is the only way, but because a lot of people need explained to how to vote.
Can I just remind everyone of what Peter just said, and I'm very sorry to say, we have to factor that in. The alternative that people see to Labour and so on is the SNP. It looks as if the SNP is going to get in. It's the largest next time. It's the largest party. John Swinney is feeling quite pleased with himself. He doesn't have to worry about a convention that was promised anymore or any of the other carrots that they've been dangling, because they're going to get back in because people are terrified of this Labour government. So he's right. I don't know how to do this, but one other thing we have to do is we have to take back that party somehow. And I've no idea how to do it, because it's been captured, as far as I can see, at the top by the British state. And I will say again, the membership of the SNP is not the same as the despicable executive at the top. That's that's what's been captured, and that's the problem with any top-down organisation, is that it can be captured in that way. But we have to face that reality. Alba's not going to take seats from the SNP. Neither is the Liberate or Indie for Indie. They're not going to make a dent on it. Politically, in terms of strategy, it would be really helpful if the SNP executive were not captured and were willing to tell people, first, vote for us first, but any other Indie candidate second, because you'd see a change then, and reform would be out, but they won't do it. And they won't do it because they're captured. They're part of that establishment. As I said, when we get listing for decolonisation, their official position is as colonial administration. So we're faced with these challenges. These are tough challenges. And I'm going to say something to everyone in this room, and everyone who bothers to watch this or is watching this now. If you think someone else is going to come up with the answer to that, and you just have to wait for one of us or somebody here or somebody over there or some
leader to ride over the hill with the answer to how we do that, then you're like the people that went to, the story I used to hear as a little girl, the wedding feast at Cana. I was told it a different way. I was told about a man who was having a wedding, holding a feast for a wedding, and all the guests were to bring wine. And the guests all said, if I bring water instead, and I put it into the wine jar, nobody will notice. And when it came time to serve the wine, all they had was water. We're the wine bringers. Every single one of us. These are really important questions, and we need to come up with the answers and not wait for somebody else to put the wine in that jar. We have to find a way of communicating with each other. We have to find a way of thinking. I mean, it's hard work. Do you know your body would prefer to go for a 3-mile walk than to sit down and make that brain engage on a really tough problem. That's a fact. You know, when you think about going to the gym and then you go, oh God. It's worse when it comes to sitting down and figuring out something like this, and you go, oh, well, someone will come up with it, some leader. We're the best resource we've got. These are serious problems. We need to turn the anger away from the powerless, among those who are frightened, who have been encouraged to do that by the British establishment, and the powerful and the privileged, and we have to turn it against the people it should be directed against. We have to figure out a way of doing that. And we've got to figure out a way of addressing the fact that the SNP is going to be elected. We need to convert them. Okay, so those are not answers. Those are the questions that I'm asking people to go away, think about, and work on.
As a member of the National Executive of the SNP, I'll say this much. Michelle's Iron Law of Oligarchy, look it up, have a look, so I'm not taking up time there. Have a look at that. And that explains, to some extent, and similar scholars since before World War I, why the Scottish National Party is where it is today. And I'm not casting animus on anybody or anything, but have a look at that. Somewhat technical, but have a look. But I'd like to say a little about reform, if I may. And this is important. First of all, the turnout, the lowering of the turnout, the effect that people aren't engaging in politics is why reform have a terrain that they can work on. They got 950 odd votes in a by-election in Hamilton while I was on holiday in France. That was not the reason why they got it, but they got it. But the turnout was relatively low. Reform becomes an issue when turnout becomes very low. Reform has become an issue because, and people can apply whoever they want to throw in this pot as they want, the mushy political centre, people are not voting for it. And that's an important point about reform. And the final point is, and thank you for letting me back in again, is I don't think you should look to reform for quick fixes in terms of the techniques that they use. Remember, they're well-resourced. They have millionaires. And my final point is this, and I hope I don't get sued for it. If reform gets in at the next election down south, one would think that whoever runs Menthorn Productions will be in for a knighthood or even been sent to the House of Lords. Because think about how Farage has managed to get into that situation without the leg up from the likes of Question Time. You know, they wouldn't be in the position that they have at the moment. They are well-resourced. They have millions of pounds, but they rely on a low turnout. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'd like to, look, we've got half an hour left, okay? After a wonderful time, it feels like group therapy right now, and I'm a little like, you know, this person...
Mark, that says more about you than the rest of the people in this room.
But anyway, go ahead.
Thank you. 2 or 3 points. One of them, you were saying about the phones with the young people. I think we need young people that can, I couldn't do it, I don't know who could do it, but put short, sharp messages in. The same as politicians do. And we need these things as well. We need short, sharp, like Scotland needs you. Things like that. But we need these things put on Twitter, YouTube, whatever, 30-second thing to capture the young people, because they're the future. As far as the voting goes, we need to capture the votes, as Peter said. Okay, they're loyalists. We can't turn and say we're fighting the loyalists. We can't say that. We can't say we're fighting the establishment. It's totally different. I'll leave it at that. I think I've said enough.
Can I come back on the thing that's been said about the SNP getting a vote and being elected? And I genuinely believe they will probably be the largest party in the Scottish Parliament. And it comes back to, and so what? What are they going to do with it? Because if the policies are more of the same, then we might as well have actually voted for reform. Because, and the low turnout is partly down to the fact that the established political parties offer nothing that excites people to get out and actually get the vote. I've been involved in politics 10 years now. I've campaigned in endless for both SNP for many, many years and the Alba Party that I joined the day that it launched. And I know I've worn out trainers. These were new ones because the last ones fell apart because I went out and delivered thousands of leaflets myself. So I've worn out shoes, literally, delivering leaflets. And people do want to talk about politics when you meet them. That's what I discover very frequently. They have a strong opinion on all sorts of things. Most of the political parties are not offering anything of substance. You know, who voted Labour and thought they were going to cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners? They never mentioned that in the election. This is turning people off of voting. So what's just been said is quite right. The Reform Party is a protest party. It will do well when turnout goes down. And when turnout in some of the local by-elections was 19%, Jesus, 81% of the population didn't vote?
Yep.
That's the end of democracy. That allows all sorts of crackpots to get elected.
Yeah.
Rather than, and it's because the mainstream parties have failed to put forward proper policies, you know, and so that's the big danger. Our biggest threat to Scotland and our biggest threat to our way of life is apathy. If people stay at home and they don't believe their vote will change anything and they won't turn out, then that's when you get Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. That's how it works.
So that's the problem. We need a solution. So coming right back, the solution is not, you know, to go and say, you must vote, you must engage, let's make voting compulsory. That's not the solution. The solution is to make voting meaningful. The solution is to give people something they can vote for and believe in. And we've got that on our shoulders.
And also make voting accessible. You know, why not put polling stations in supermarkets? You know, who would have thought a few years ago we would just be swiping or tapping a machine to buy a single purchase? You know, if you'd walked into a sweet shop when I was a kid and you wanted one of something, they would say, no, you've got to buy something more. And now you can just go in, you use your card, you swipe it, and you get whatever your single purchase is. Everything has totally changed, and technology has made everything accessible. So why not voting? Why not being able to, you know, get your supermarket groceries, and then the woman might say, you know, do you want extra cash or anything else?
It can be scammed.
Not with blockchain, it can't.
Well,
look at the American election where the hanging chads and everything.
That's electronic voting. It's not blockchain
Well, what
voting.
I'm saying is the germane point is still the same.
Well,
If you're
elections
voting
have been
like you suggest,
scammed
can
for
you
centuries.
scam an election results to people?
The first election that the UN Council declared, I can't remember what the name of it was, the committee that looked at it, declared absolutely tamper-proof and free from corruption, was an election in Kenya by which each person had their own code, and it was a blockchain vote, and they places they could go and vote at supermarkets or wherever. It was completely tamper-proof. So it is possible to create that. In fact, we've been looking, one of our...
Sarah, you say that now, but with AI and other technologies, can you guarantee that the vote wouldn't be
Well, I can...
hijacked? I don't think blockchain is the answer.
Well, I can tell you that I don't think ballot boxes that can be emptied between the polling station and the count are exactly reliable either.
Still the best.
Can I just bring back on one thing though?
Very quickly.
Yeah,
I want to get through a few more questions,
in Edinburgh.
So everybody can be brief for dinner.
Yeah, in Edinburgh, at the last council election that I was involved in, which was last year, there's so few polling stations because they now don't want to use public buildings because they have to pay for it. So it's usually a church hall. So that reduces, I mean, there's also a ridiculous situation where two churches literally around the corner from each other are being used as polling stations because that one is on the edge of another part of the... anyway, so the issue is the powers to be are making it more difficult for people to vote. And that because that affects the people they don't want to vote. And I got that in Edinburgh West, which is quite an upmarket area. You know, when I stood in the general election, the turnout in the more affluent parts of the constituency, the turnout was huge, absolutely huge. And most of them used postal votes. So when people start thinking they can be tampered with, well, it seems to be working for the very people that they want to aim votes at. So postal votes, and actually do vote, is one of the messages you have to get out there. That, you know, electronic voting, I happen to think it's not beyond computer programmers to make a secure system. We should be able to use an app to vote. Our politicians should be voting via an app. They shouldn't have to go down to London, to Westminster, to be within 20 minutes of a chamber every day so that they can vote for the next ring bell. They should be able to do it from home.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. We're all going back to this thing about reform and everybody else and whether or not SNP is going to get in or not. And it seems to me that whatever you do here, you're going to have at some time or another some sort of representation in the Parliament. Now, the gentleman here tells us that all of the best SNP MSPs have left. Why can't you go around them and see if they would all come and stand for the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group and put up a party of our own? It might work.
Well, it would be, first of all, it would be great to get some of the talent back into politics. It will not happen from SSRG because we're a non-partisan think tank. We all have personal opinions, it's why we're engaged, but we're never going to be involved in putting people up for election. That's never going to happen because then we wouldn't be impartial and then we'll just be another part. And then we can't attract people from different parties because they become very tribal and I'm not going there because they're part of that. So the idea for SSRG is to be impartial. But you're absolutely right. I do think, and Yvonne did this, she was an independent candidate in Newcastle, is it North and Central?
Central and West.
Central and West. And stood in what is a pretty Labour part of it as an independent candidate in the last general election, got 7% of the vote, which was fairly decent actually. So she got her £500 deposit back. I didn't, but I didn't care. Yeah, J.K. Rowling sort of came in and endorsed me, and that probably killed my chances. So we should encourage people to stand as independents, as politicians, real people with real experience. I think most of what's sick in and failing in politics is the political party's mechanism itself. I think that's what's wrong with it. So instead of you dealing with your MP and your MP has their own principles, I did this as an independent, standing as an independent candidate in Edinburgh West in the general election. It was a breath of fresh air to meet constituents when they asked me, and I had lots of very interesting conversations and questions thrown at me, and they ask you a question about something. One of them was on assisted dying. And some people want you to commit that you're against it. Others want you to commit that you're going to support it. And you get that again on abortion and lots of very important issues. Some of those issues I'd never thought about myself. I don't actually have a strong opinion of it. And so I come back to my core principles. I think the state should stay out of people's lives as much as possible, and you should be free to make your own decisions. So if you're a woman and it's about abortion, then it's the woman's choice. It's her body. We have no right to enforce what we think are our moral standards on other people. So that's my view on that, and that's the answer I gave. But it opened your eyes that as an independent candidate, you can speak honestly about what you really feel and what your true beliefs are in something. The problem with political parties is, one, they want to be seen to be different to the other political parties so that they've got something unique to sell you, so that you'll vote for them. And two, they don't want to say anything too controversial because that might switch you off. And they don't want to be too committed to anything because they might change their mind as it's no longer popular. So you don't really know what you're voting for. And the people that go into it, and they do get elected as an MP for whatever party it happens to be, Labour or SNP or even the Conservatives, etc., they get elected, they think they're going to be able to make a difference. They all go into it thinking they're going to be able to make a difference. That machine will grind you down south and stop you from making any difference. And if you dare speak up against your party leadership, you will find you're excommunicated and you're kicked out. So independence is the way to go for real democracy, because your contract is between you, the voter, and the person you're getting elected. Not you, the voter, and a political party that you've always voted for, that's got all the resources, and the person that they've stuck in, who probably doesn't even live in your constituency. You know, that's the big difference. And I think if you want real democracy and real representation, you should be focusing on the person that you're voting for, not the party. It should be totally immaterial which party you vote for. It's who you're voting for. Will they stand up for what you believe in?
Was the trans issue a big issue on the doorstep?
I had a couple of, now, I made a very clear choice that I stand for women's equality. I put that number one on my key issues. I put it in my electoral address. I had it on my ad trailer and everything. 2 occasions it got brought up. One, somebody who I think was actually unhinged came down shouting and bawling and swearing at me on edge like this, and I just stood very calmly and I spoke just like this, and I said, can I help you? I thought, oh wow. You, and I was being accused of being a bigot and all this, all the usual buzzwords that go along with this. And I thought, well, first of all, I'm not a bigot. I try very hard not to be a bigot, and I'm pushing for equality, and that goes for everybody. So I tried to have. I didn't rise to the bait. This made this person even more angry, and tried telling me I shouldn't be there and I should F off and never come back to their place ever again. I thought, well, unfortunately for you, I grew up here, and then this street is where I lived for 14 years, so I won't be buggering off. I suggest you don't vote for me. And they stormed off, and I thought, wow. Someone was watching, and he came up and went, I've been watching you. Wow, you never flinched. He went, does that happen a lot? I went, thankfully not, it doesn't. I respect the person doesn't agree with me on it, okay? I think they've misunderstood my stance on the policy, because I stand for non-discrimination against everybody. The fact that I'm standing up for women's rights in particular, and I also in that election stood on, I wanted funny enough, the Equality Act clarified so that sex was biological. And I said I was going to bring in a private member's bill on exactly that issue if it wasn't done. And I wrote Anyway, I knew the women were taking that case to the Supreme Court. I thought there was a risk it might be thrown out and sent back to Parliament for a decision. And I thought, well, that means at least you've got 2 bites of the cherry. So I was extremely pleased at the ruling that came out. So was it a big issue? It is for some people, but majority of people haven't paid attention to the transgender ideology. And I think we should be paying more attention. The fact that this is being taught to little primary school children, I think, is extremely dangerous. Because, there's a reason why we have broadcast regulations to stop fast food ads going out during children's programs. Children are easily influenced. So if they're easily influenced, we should be very careful what we're teaching in primary schools.
Hello. Can I have a wee? Sorry, I
Yes,
did wait.
sure.
Sorry. So just to say thank you for the weekend, sir, and I've learned so much. I may well get booed in the next 2 seconds.
Oh dear. Sorry, I've got a cushion for you.
Oh, no, you have. Well, as long as it's the one with the blue and white one without the... As long as it's that one, I'll take it. I'm going to get booed because I will say, amongst very few people here, I would imagine I am a member of the SNP. And I've come along to learn. Whether I stay a member of the SNP or is neither here nor there. I've also spent a lot of time in local politics. And I'd just like to address the next steps bit. And what I always had success with when I'm fighting the local council, when I'm fighting the powers that be, when I also run a charity and I have to deal with government and so on. And what I've always found to be successful is stop looking for the magic bullet.
Yeah.
There is no silver bullet. What you want is a hail of bullets. Not literally, just what you want is to attack on all fronts. Basically, the legal system is broken and malfunctioning. We have the wrong definition of the country. That needs changing. Well done, Sarah. I'm fully now confident that is well in hand.
Yes.
What else is broken? The media is broken. Right, we can't use that media. Okay, let's use the new media. Because as you point out, the internet is coming along and a fast YouTube flick will get you more views than any bit on TV. A blog post will get you, and an email newsletter will get you more than a newspaper article will. So you do that as well. The politicians are broken. You need new politicians.
I know.
So what you need, but what I was saying to some people outside is, it's not, don't say all of the SNP is broken. I am more fiercely for independence today than ever I was. And I was in grief stages the day after 2014. Yeah. I couldn't move for 4 days because I was struck by grief. And that is still there, and the anger is still there, as it is with a great many in the SNP and the overall independence movement. There are great ideas about land reform and wealth tax. So I will finish by saying this. There is no single message. The people you're trying to reach, and I live in an orange hole where people will wear England shirts to Rangers games. That's how far their identity goes. When I chap doors for the SNP, they go, no, I don't want to vote SNP, but I'm going to vote Reform. That's coming. There are many, many different reasons, many different fears that people have. The enemy you're looking for those people to be against is not one single enemy. They have lots of different needs, lots of different fears, but fortunately, stroke unfortunately, as the Americans have shown, advertising can be targeted. Messaging can be targeted. Don't send the message about Gary Stevenson and inequality, which is one of the most important things in the world at the moment. Don't send that message to somebody that doesn't know a damn thing about it. Send them a different message. Send me the message about Gary Stevenson and inequality. And if you want to start making a noise about that, because what I've noticed about the independents and the lack of movement in the SNP and the lack of movement in it is it's a bit like going to support a football team. See, when your team's doing nothing, You don't cheer. You don't get out of your seat. See when your team's racing up the park and maybe going to score one goal, might not win the game, but one goal, you're out of your seat and roaring. That's how you get people behind you, by making a noise, by doing stuff, and by just start a fight.
About 2 or 3 years ago, I was attacked verbally by a woman and a guy in Rutherglen High Street saying, "You're obsessed with that gender stuff. You know what my Wayne is learning at school?" I said, "To stop right there." I said, "I'm nothing to do with SNP. Nothing." And today, it's still the same. The SNP are, apart from, where is it? Bill's away, right? Right? The SNP are still obsessed with the gender thing. And what I find when I talk to people in supermarkets, I mention, right, quite rightly, I said the SNP are still welcoming men with lipstick into women's toilets with children there. And it's their Achilles heel. And if we can break them on anything, including that, then all the votes that people have blindly given to the SNP up till now are up for grabs. And the lesson to learn from that is, look what happened to the Tory party. They almost destroyed themselves, and people grabbed onto Labour at the last election thinking there's a salvation. And look how wrong they were. But we are offering salvation, and we have to break the SNP, and they will be broken sooner or later.
So can I come back to
use any
something
tactic
you said?
you can, any tactic.
Yeah. Something that you said, that you were grief-stricken. Now, I wasn't a member. I'd never voted for them until 2014. The day after the referendum is when I joined. So I'd emotionally invested in the Yes movement and was looking forward to a better country, fixing all the terrible things that we're still seeing going on, that we could build a better country. And it was an enlightening experience over the summer of 2014. And I was still very enthusiastic up until about 2018. The SNP's issues are within its own organisation. So its members need to take back control of its party and get it back on to doing what it was doing before, which was focusing on socially progressive policies, trying to build a better economy, and preparing the country for independence, which is its sole purpose. So but that's an issue for the SNP. I'm not a member anymore. If I look at it, if it's a good day on the vote, I will probably vote for them on the constituency, and I'll probably give my second vote to Alba on the list. And I will hope, but it is a wing and a prayer, that somehow, if lots of people did the same thing, we would get a balance of power where the SNP was not big enough to run itself, a government itself, but had to do deals with other people. I also think it's much healthier democracy because you have to trade, you know? So that's what I would hope is going to happen. If people want a yes, how I have to say, and this is where I take issue with the SNP, their current policy on currency makes no sense. Their claim that we're going to rejoin the EU, they can't, because they've also agreed at the same time to free ports, and they're completely incompatible with the EU. And if you don't have a currency, you don't control your own economy, you can't join the EU. So when they talk about we need to rejoin the EU, they're completely misleading everybody, because you have to change the other policies first. So I just hope that somehow, you're in the party, so I rely on somebody like you to try and help change it. Because I was there for 7-8 years, I think, and I left. And I took time out of my thing to make sure I voted for Joanna Cherry. I drove there and then put in my vote, right, and then went back to my campaign because it was in the next constituency. And I was very disappointed to hear that she had lost, because she was a really good MP. And that's what I mean. We've lost her. We've lost Douglas Chapman, who was here earlier, right? He was the local MP here. He decided to leave. He's clearly got a vision for Scotland and trade and ferry route links from Scotland to Europe. So these are the people we need to encourage to rejoin, either stand as an independent or rejoin politics. But, right, you're all sitting here. I think most of you want someone else to stand and be elected. Well, I've been, and I used to do that. It's much different, I have to tell you, when it's your name that's on it. You know, how did I get myself into this? But somewhere out here, you need to stand. You need to get involved. Stop waiting for someone else to do it. We need more people that have got real life experience and not people that have only got experience of politics.
This will be the final question.
It might not be a question, it might be more of a statement. But anyway, thanks for the last few days, and I'd like to revisit what we learned the last few days, because it's been a real eye-opener for me, because I'm an engineer, and engineers like solutions, and they like solutions based on facts. And you've given me lots of facts, and you've given me lots of solutions. And I can now go to many unionists and answer them questions on energy, currency, macroeconomics, everything that we've talked about in the Constitution in a way that I couldn't do before I came here. So thank you for that. And
thank you.
And what I think we need to do is take all of this stuff and bring it together in some form of economic and social policy that we can then sell to people, because we keep saying we've got a rich country, we produce all this wealth, right? I mean, think what we can do with that now. From the energy talk, we can subsidize electricity prices and gas prices because we're going to be so rich. We can attract industry with lower energy prices because we're going to be so rich. We can build community centres and sports centres again in our communities. We can fund our schools better. We can fund our universities and keep our free education. Now, I'm not coming at this from a middle class background. I'm coming at this from a working class background. My dad was a coal miner. I got a free education. My mum and dad got a council house. That changed their lives in the 1950s, right? And I was lucky enough to be able to build on that and have a great career. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to give every kid in this country that kind of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Because if we're ever going to get rid of the racism and bigotry in any society, we need education. And everybody needs to take their education to the highest level. And I'm a son of this town as well, right? And I'm really proud of my upbringing here. And I saw what left-wing politics could do for me and my community in the past. And we need to really, I think we need to go along with the SNP. I know you disagree with me, right? I do think we can infiltrate it with these kind of arguments. I think we can come up with a real manifesto on what we've built on the last 3 days and what other people are doing. And we can come up with, as the gentleman at the front says, sound bites. We can come up with those sound bites and we can publicize them on social media, and we can get this message across in YouTube videos, on Twitter, or whatever it's called, X and stuff like that, right? And there's young people that can do that stuff. Get them to do it for us. Don't leave it to us, right? Get them involved and get them engaged and get them to do it. And some advice for the gentleman from Kirkcaldy, who I really appreciated him, you know, saying that the lady wasn't really British. Say that technically she's English, and I think that might be a stronger response to her to get her to vote SNP. Who knows? But anyway, that's my input.
Okay. That was a lovely final comment. I'd like to, in closing out this article, this conference. I first want to, give a good round of applause for, a lot of them aren't here, but the people who have participated in this conference and have given us such amazingly substantive, information that David and I and others will be working on to package, not in a cheap advertising sense, but really, put these documents down, but put these arguments down, and put them in digestible form that people can understand, so that people can understand their history better, and what, you know, and learn that many of the things that the panel yesterday did, and in addition to the ones on the Constitution, the one that Jim Sillars gave about the realism that needs to be involved when you're dealing with the British state, and the preparations that need to be done for any negotiation with the British state, and you know, all of the other amazingly important issues that have been brought up and at least in part responded to. And it didn't always have all of the answers, but at least they posed the questions in a way that's that was understandable, that was comprehensible, and that gives us we as all of us intelligent people the means to better understand these problems, therefore to better address these problems, and to get to a point where we can take the future into our own hands. So thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.